going on, gang? Big Rob back with MBE Homebrewing, previously known as Make Beer Easy. We'll get into that in a sec, but for those of you just tuning in, first time to check out any of these videos or what have you, name's Big Rob. I own mbehomebrewing.com. Today we are going to talk about a comparison. I've been doing some comparison videos, kind of, in this case it's Pale Ale versus IPA. I've done Stout versus Porter and such. So we're continuing on in that versus categories. So for those of you who have found me through a search on YouTube or Google, what have you, stay tuned. We are going to dive into what is the difference between these two very similar beers. Before we get into that, BigRobMakeBeerEasy.com or MBEHomebrewing.com. That one's a bit of a mouthful, taking me a while to get used to it. We've switched from just Make Beer Easy because now I'm kind of branching into other alcoholic beverages. So we're on our blog. You're going to see not just beer stuff, although it's primarily beer. That is my focus and my passion, but we are starting to branch into, how to make hooch, how to make sake, mead, cider, all that stuff as well, wine, of course. So welcome. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you like it. If you don't, well then don't. It's okay. And the full link to this blog post, so there'll be a corresponding blog post, and I'm looking at it here on my computer. If you see me gandering this way, I haven't had too many of these. I'm not getting all cross-eyed and going crazy just yet. The full link will be under this video, so if you want to go over there, if you're into making your own beer, head over there and you can subscribe to get my top 5 favorite recipes from my brew pub that I used to own. I'm giving those away for free. So they're yours. Okay, guys, history. Let's start with the history of the Pale Ale. What is the difference? Well, first of all, that's a Pale Ale. Okay, for those of you who are IPA lovers, I got news for you. You might think you can tell the difference by looking at it. You really can't. They're very similar beers. Now, I'm not talking about a New England IPA, which is an IPA. I'm talking about a standard IPA. Very difficult to tell the difference. Talking too much, I need a drink. Yes, sir. Okay, let's start with the history. The Pale Ale came first. Okay, so the Pale Ale is the granddaddy, the grandpapa of an IPA. An IPA is actually a Pale Ale. So, are all Pale Ales IPA? No, but all IPAs are, in fact, Pale Ales. So, back in history of 1700s, the beers over in Europe, England, were primarily darker ales. Okay, so we're talking stouts, we're talking porters, those type of darker colored ales. And that was because of how the grains and malts were produced at that time. As technology advanced, the process of harvesting the grains, and I always pronounce it wrong, but a kilning process developed where different grains could be dried at different levels, let's put it that way, which resulted in beers being able to be brewed with lighter colored grains, lighter malts, producing a paler beer and a lighter tasting beer. They called these beers Pale Ales. Okay, so that's how the Pale Ale, a high elevated kind of quick overview for you guys on how Pale Ales came to be. These beers allowed, because they were lighter in taste, they allowed the hops to shine through more, where the other beers were dominated primarily by the grains themselves. Okay, so think stout, think porter. Okay, now mind you can get black IPAs, which do use some of the darker grains as well, but you typically don't get the hop characteristics, notes, aroma, flavor, etc. Okay, so those beers, because hops, of course, provide bitterness, and the bitterness shines through, those beers were also called bitters. So that's kind of a little bit of a trivia there for you as well. Now, there's a debate as to how IPAs came to be. I'm going to go with the story that I've always touted as being the gospel, and we're going to stick with it because Big Rob said so. So here's what happened. Way back in, let's say, the 1800s, about 100 years later, the British had their colonies down in India, And they wanted, of course, the Brits down there, they wanted a nice refreshing beverage like they were used to having back home. The problem was long ocean voyage. Okay, that would cause issues in transportation. The beers would spoil. So what did they do? They took the good old pale ale, they increased the alcohol content, and they hopped the shite out of it. Okay, now hops are a natural preservative, so the beer, due to the extra alcohol content and higher hops, was able to make it down to India and was consumed down there, enjoyed very much, and a new offshoot of pale ale was formed. Okay, so that's how the IPAs came to be. So what is a pale ale? It's known for having a balanced aroma and flavor. It's nicely balanced, and I'm talking like traditional pale ale. Of course, now there's a lot of APAs, American pale ales, that lean more towards being an IPA really than what I consider a pale ale to be. But the traditional pale ales, they would have a nice balance between the malt and hops. Okay, so you're gonna be able to taste both, but it's nicely balanced. There's different types of pale ales you can get. You're gonna get, it all depends on the hops, really. You can get, you know, the fruity, citrusy type, or you can get the earthy, spicy, herbal flavored pale ales. And again, it's all due to the hops. Okay, lots of variations to the pale ales, of course, and actually blondes and goldens are pale ales. APAs are pale ales, and like I said, bitters, etc., are also a form of pale ale. When it comes to an IPA, basically, in my honest opinion, it is a hopped up version of a pale ale. Okay, basically, it gets the majority of its flavor from the hops, and as you've seen in modern times, they're just hopping the shite out of them. The more hops, the better. The brewers are getting crazy, and they're just loading them up with hops. And of course, in an attempt to try to balance out the bitterness from the hops, they also increase the grains, so you get a little bit of maltiness, which increases the alcohol content. Let's see, the British IPA, which is my favorite when it comes to IPA, would be the closest that you would get to the original version of the original IPA that came around in the 1800s. Let's see what else I can tell you. Guys, you know what? That's pretty much it. Some good examples. A pale ale, I can tell you the ABV pale ales of ABV, alcohol by volume, percentage of a pale ale should come in around 4.5 to 5.5. A single IPA, and when I say single, I don't mean a double or a triple. I'm just talking a normal IPA is going to have an ABV of, I say 5.5 to 6.5. You'd see 7% as well. I think you're starting to get into double IPA land there. But those would be the alcohol volumes. Pale ales, like I say, are definitely more balanced. They have an equal balance between the fruit, earthy, spicy characteristics of the hops and the biscuit, kind of toast, bready characteristics of the malt. Or the IPAs, you will detect some of that, especially in the English or maybe the traditional American, but a lot of the other IPAs, such as the NIPA and the NIPA and the West Coast and session IPAs, they are more hop forward for sure. Examples of IPAs, you can go check it out in the blog, but an English pale ale, there's a Timothy Taylor's Landlord, that's a classic pale ale, English style. If you're in North America, an American pale ale, Zombie Dust would be a good example of it. For an English IPA, Harpoon IPA is a good example of an English IPA. New England IPAs are everywhere, you've seen them. West Coast IPAs, Headhunter, Fatheads Brewery, there's all kinds of them around. And double IPA, actually, I tried this last time I was down south visiting my mother in Florida, but Florida Man by Cigar City is a good one. So that's what I got, guys. Basic difference, IPA is a pale ale that's been hopped up, and alcohol content has been increased as well. That is the basic core difference between the two of them. If you got any questions, by all means, reach out. Drop a comment. Always like to hear from you folks who are tuning in. And again, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click the link to the blog post and head on over there if you want to read about it instead of just hearing me blabbering on here. And also sign up to get my 5 free recipes that I'm giving you that were my 5 personal favorite from my brew pub. That's what I got. And now to turn this camera off, I'm out of here. See you guys.